The Lord be with you.
And also with you.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus again, in reply, spoke to the chief priests and elders of the people in parables, saying, "The kingdom of heaven may be likened to a king who gave a wedding feast for his son."
The wedding feast. It's life. It's the abundance you just heard Paul talking about. It's the fullness of life in which wholeness and integrity is at its very heart.
He dispatched his servants to summon the invited guests to the feast, but they refused to come. A second time he sent his other servants, saying, "Tell those invited, behold, I have prepared my banquet. My calves and fattened cattle are killed, and everything is ready. Come to the feast." Some ignored the invitation and went away, one to his farm and another to his business. And the rest laid hold of his servants, mistreated them, and killed them. Well, the king was enraged and sent his troops, destroyed those murderers, and burned their city. And then he said to his servants, "The feast is ready, but those who were invited were not worthy to come. Go out therefore into the main roads and invite to the feast whomever you find."
Invite whomever. All are invited to this abundance. All are invited to this fullness. Each and every person can know this fullness for themselves. Educated or uneducated can know it. Married and single can know it. Saints and sinners, the failures of this world and the successful, they can each know it. The healthy and the sick, the gay and the straight, the woman and the man, the powerful and the powerless, the believer and the unbeliever, old and young, everybody can know the abundance, the fullness.
So the servants went out into the streets and gathered all they found, bad and good alike, and the hall was filled with guests. But when the king came in to meet the guest, he saw a man there not dressed in a wedding garment.
But there is something required. If we want to experience the fullness, there is something required of each of us without exception. If we want to know that fullness, that abundance that is possible for us. And that wedding garment symbolizes that something. And we cannot get in without it.
The king said to him, "My friend, how is it that you came in here without a wedding garment?" But he was reduced to silence. Then the king said to his attendants, "Bind his hands and feet and cast him into the darkness outside, where there will be wailing and grinding of teeth."
If we refuse that something that we have to do to get in, the only thing left to us is the wailing and grinding of teeth. The wailing and the grinding of teeth is not about eternal damnation. It's about the soul work we have yet to do that is really hard work.
Many are invited, but few are chosen. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. I'd like to share with you a very old fable. Some suggest it is 10,000 years old. It comes out of New Zealand area and its environs. It is a folk myth, and it's most popularly called the half-boy story. The story of the half-boy. A child is born, but only half of the child is born. Only half of him. Only his left half of his head, and only his left eye, and only his left shoulder, and his left arm, and his left leg, and his left hip. And so maybe for that reason, the child is screaming. And because only half there, the people of the city don't like to look at it. And so the people of the city turn away. But the louder that half-boy screams, the more people turn away. And the more people turn away, the louder the half-boy screams. So the child grows without getting very much attention at all. When he comes to be a youth, even his own family won't look at him anymore. So he decides to leave the village. And he drags himself away from the village. No one notices that he's gone. He goes to the river, and he drags himself alongside on the banks of the river. And he sees something up ahead. It's kind of blurry. Blurry because he only has one eye. So he squints, and he makes out another half-boy. The other half. This half-boy was the right side only. He had only a right eye, only a right half of his head, only a right shoulder, only a right arm, only a right hip and a right leg. And that half, that right half, comes together with this left half. And you would think that they would, in finding the other half, they would live happily ever after. But they begin to fight. And they fight so intensely that it becomes a huge conflict, these two halves. And it stirs up a huge dust storm, and they tumble together into the water of the river, and the water churns and churns, and the water piles up wave upon wave. And then after a while, it all calms down, and the river begins to look like it did on any given day. But there's no sign of the half-boy or that other half-boy. And then after a while, the river begins to churn again, and wave piles up again, one upon another, and out of it comes the half-boy. But now the two halves are together. But he's so disoriented because he's never had two halves before. And he can't figure out where he is or what's going on. So he makes his way out of the river and makes his way into a village. And he sees an old man sitting there with one foot in the village and one foot outside the village. And he says to the old man, "I'm confused. I got into this big conflict, and so I don't know where I am." And the old man says to him, "I can tell you where you are. You are right back where you started. You are back at the village you started in. But now, since you are whole, if you and I enter the village together, you being young and me being old, if we dance into the village together, the whole village will begin to dance again, because no one has danced since you left." So the half-boy, now whole, and this older elder, they come together and they go dancing into the village. And the whole village comes out and dances. We are each that half-boy. work that's ours to do is our own inner work. The one thing required of us, the one thing required that each of us has to do, is we have to do our own work. Whatever it is, there is one struggle. There is one struggle that we each have to enter into. And there are no guarantees that we will make it through. But if we don't do that work that is ours, this inner work, you see, we will never know the fullness, the promise of abundance, what it means to live whole and integrated. And it's work, and it's hard, and it's scary, and quite frankly, few are willing to do it. What is this river? It's our own turbulent place. When I ask young people what they would say the river is, oftentimes their response is alcohol, drugs, having been raised with only a black and white world, depression, violence. This turbulent place is everything we struggle with, and we all have to go down into the river. All of us have to go into the river. And the question we have as we do it is whether we'll come out whole or not. No guarantees. And the question we have is who will be our elders? Who will lead us to the river? Who will lead us out of the river when we emerge from it again? And who will remind us that the whole community has a stake in us each becoming whole ourselves? The good news is we don't have to do this work, this inner work that is ours to do, all alone. There are those who will lead us to the river and who will continuously remind us of the invitation posted for us that we can experience still the fullness of life when we despair that it'll ever be our experience of life. And that we don't have to keep on living a half life. Who will walk with us? Who will wait with us when it's our turn? Elders, mentors. The world needs elders and mentors who will lead us, who've done this work before us. I'd like to believe with all of my heart, and I've seen it to be true again and again, I pray, God, that it be true for forever and ever and ever, that any student, any human being who walks through these doors will know that the whole Catholic Student Center, and indeed the whole church ultimately, will be here for us to do just that with us. That when we start to want to be whole, this community will be there for us. When we start to want to be whole. You and I have to go to the river. But there are some here and everywhere who already have and will again. But they have once. And we will wait for you when it's your turn. And we will stand beside the river hoping, 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 precisely because we've been there ourselves. And we will lead you back to where you were, whole now, in integrity, back to the dancing that is the fullness of life. And you will begin to see that the work you have done to become whole, to know the fullness of life, to dance again, will help everybody around you become whole and dance now themselves. When you emerge from the river, we who've preceded you there to that struggle in our own lives, we will be waiting for you to dance. My friends, don't die a half man. Don't die a half of a woman. Don't die having only lived a half of a life. Do the work that is yours now. Begin to put yourself together. It is the one thing required. And the wholeness will never happen without those struggles, unless you do your work. You have fundamental choices to make. And if you don't, you will live a half of a life. A half-hearted life.